Hey y'all, today I'll be replacing the oil pan gasket on a 2001 Nissan Pathfinder. Um, this has been leaking for a long time. Uh, I've already done the rear main seal. That's done, so this is the final big thing to do with this engine. Basically, if you have an '01 to '04 Pathfinder, if you're experiencing leaks from the back of the engine when you're parked, most likely it's your rear oil pan gasket that's failed. This was exactly what this was doing, but I decided just to do the rear main seal for the hell of it. Might as well get it all done. So to do this, we have to drop this whole subframe here. So some of the tools you're going to need for this job is an engine support bar. It's a must because what you're going to have to do is disconnect the engine mounts on each side from the subframe so you can drop this whole subframe assembly. So this is important. You get these at Harbor Freight, 80 bucks, 90 bucks. I think I said that in my last video. You're going to need a good jack. So since I'm done my rear main seal job and the transmission's back up, I'm just going to be using my transmission jack because I have a lot more surface area to put the subframe support bar that holds the rack and pinion. You can use an ordinary floor jack. Where's my ordinary floor jack? You can just use a regular floor jack like this with just a block of wood on top as well. I'm just using this because it's just a little more stable and I have it, so might as well use it. And other than that, just, if you have an impact, use an impact. You can use a breaker bar, normal ratchet set. You don't have to have an impact. But you have to remove a lot of stuff from this engine before you can get this job done. I've already taken the bolts out and cracked the oil pan loose. It's just holding up with 2 bolts right now. What you're going to have to do is you're going to have to take off your alternator, your power steering pump. You don't have to disconnect them completely. We have to do the alternator completely, but the power steering pump, you can just zip tie it to the side of the frame here. You're going to have to also make sure to undo the braces that hold the return line for the power steering reservoir, because those are connected to the subframe. You're also going to have to loosen this pinch bolt for the steering rack. Make sure, I haven't done it yet, but make sure you put a line, right here or wherever, signifying where it was, so you don't have a wacky steering wheel when you're putting it all back together. Other than that, I think that's about all you need to do. I have the exhaust off already. I'm just redoing the exhaust manifold gaskets because it desperately needed them. You don't have to remove those, but it does give you some extra working room. I have the engine support actually braced around. There's a little hole in between the engine mount, so that's where I have it hoisted on each side. I don't know where any anchor points are else on this engine, but yeah, I'm trying to think what else you have to disconnect. I think that's about it. But you do all the bolts on the pan, and there's also 4 bolts. We'll zoom in here. There's 4 bolts on each side of the bell housing that you have to do. As you see, since it's a little lower than the actual bell housing, I've already done those bolts. There's 4 of them that hold the oil pan in. You're gonna have to get those out, as you can see right there too. After that, the oil pan should crack loose. Just get a flat screwdriver, something that won't fuck it up too bad, to break it loose. Other than that, we're pretty much ready to start this job. So I'm going to move this under the brace, and then we're going to get started on the rear bolts, and I'm going to show you which bolts to remove to do the subframe. But first, I'm going to buzz the bolts off of the motor mount, since my motor is secured up here. Alright, so we're going to have to remove the engine mounting bolts, which there's 4 bolts, 2 on each side. You just have to remove the lower ones. And there's the two over there. Once those off, the engine will be free from the subframe, and we can start buzzing off the bolts. Also, to remind you, this is a two-wheel drive model. I do not have the the front diff or drive shaft. If you have a four-wheel drive version, you're going to have to remove the diff and the drive shaft and your CB axles. So luckily, two-wheel drive, it's a little less steps. So yeah, so we're gonna get those off real quick. All right, so we got our 4 motor mount bolts off. The engine is now free from the subframe. Like I said, make sure it's tight. You don't want any, slack. Make sure also when you do this, make sure you're not pinching any bolts. You don't want any, I'm sorry, you're not pinching any wires. You don't want any wires being pinched. Actually, that looks like the coil pack wire, but you know what, it's fine. Let me see, let me make sure it's, actually it looks like it's right between, so we're good. On the side too, I've moved all the harnesses and supports and all that, so it is just the engine. All right, so now what we're gonna do is we're going to unbolt the subframe. As you see, my jack is in place and it is, ready to go. So what we're going to do is we're going to start from the back and we're going to then do the 2 front ones. So let me get on our creeper. So the 2 front ones you're going to do are these 2 right here. That's your 2 front ones. And let me get around the back. Oops. Your 2 rear ones are this one and this one. So we're going to do these first, and then we're going to drop the, take the 2 front ones out, and it should be fully free from the chassis. And yeah, so let's start with that. Alright, so my bolts for the subframe are, let me get it in there, are buzzed off up here, buzzed off back there. So you should have 8 bolts total. Well, 4 nuts and 4 bolts. Alright, so the only thing to do now is to lower the subframe. I'm actually going to have to, I need both hands and concentration for this, so I'm going to stop the video and it'll be lowered in the next clip. Alright guys, so oil pan is out and subframe is dropped. So yeah, so let's take a look, see. As you can see, that was my rear main seal leak. This is the back of the oil pan, and I have a lot of cleaning to do. So when you're doing the oil pan, you have these 2 channels right here that connect to the oil pump. Basically, I'm sorry, not to the oil pump, to the oil filter. There's 2 O-rings that go here. Actually, I got one. I went to Nissan and they gave me the wrong ones. They were too thick. I think they're for the later, the later model VQs. So this is the O-ring. You have to replace these. If not, you're gonna have a bad time. So I gotta wait till tomorrow for them to come in. I'm glad it's not discontinued. So I'm gonna have to finish the reinstallation process tomorrow. So today what I'm gonna do is just clean off all the old gasket, get rid of this gasket. On the back of the engine, I have the new rear oil pan gasket, because it comes with the rear main seal assembly when you buy the part. So yeah, unfortunately I gotta leave the engine hanging up for the night. But I mean, it should be fine. No other things, specifically when you're doing this. But once you drop the subframe, I mean, it's, of course, leave it on the jack. Make sure your jack's secure. I also have 2 jack stands supporting the rear of the, well, they're actually not. It's not low enough to hit the jack stands, but I have them there just in case, you never know if for some reason this one fails, it doesn't drop the whole thing. I mean, even if it does, it's completely disconnected from the vehicle besides the control arms and tie rods and the sway bar. And also, you don't have to remove any of that. It comes down just fine. I may have to get a new alignment once I put it back up, but it doesn't really put much stress on the rack and pinion or the tie rods. So yeah, we will continue this tomorrow. Alrighty, so oil pan's back up. I completely forgot to make a video beforehand, but all you do is, put RTV like you do on any oil pan. There's 2 O-rings that I showed before that I went to Nissan and I got replaced. You have to, basically what I did was, I put the RTV on and you don't have a lot of time before it starts, setting. So I got the oil pan in place and lifted it up, and I put the back, very far back, driver's side bolt in on the back of the pan to hold it. And then what I did is I came around front here, put this bolt in just to kind of hold it and hover it right over, right over the block. And what I did was I took some pliers and squeezed in between the crack of the pan and the block, and I basically, what did I do with it? Basically took, took the seal and kind of just set it in there. Because if you try to put them on when putting the pan up, they're going to just slide all over and fall in the pan or fall out, and they're not going to be even. So you really have to make sure they're perfectly lined up with the holes, in the block and the pan. That's probably the most tricky part of this. And then, of course, torque them all to spec, which I think is 15 foot-pounds of torque for all the bolts. So now I'm doing the subframe, putting the subframe back up. I've already kind of started. So basically what it is a series of lining bolts up. So first, as you're lifting it up, these bolts are going to line up in first. As you see, they're both in. See how it's kind of at a cocked angle. And then, after that, we're going to have to line up the motor mount bolts in next. And then after that, it should just go right up. And then, you're done with the job. All right, so subframe is up. Yeah, so, like I was saying in the, you're going to, want to line, put those 2 bolts, line those up first. And then you're going to kind of finagle the engine mount and move it around until they line up in the holes. And then you can slowly jack it up more. And also remember to get your pinch bolt lined up to the steering rack. I think I forgot to mention earlier, you're going to have to disconnect your high pressure and your return lines for your steering system. Because if not, you're not going to have enough, there's not enough clearance to keep them on there. And remember when I was saying to line up the pinch bolt and the rack so you don't get a wacky steering wheel? Well, guess what? Wacky steering wheel. So, I'm just going to have to, say that you do that while doing this job, I'm going to have to unbolt it from here and then pull it up and realign it. Extra step, but you know what? It all went in fine. And once you get it all torqued down, then you can undo your engine support bar and you're pretty much done. Hope y'all like this video. It's my first video, and there's gonna be a lot more because she's got a lot more work I need done. Next will be suspension. I'm going to do the transmission filter and pan. Since the transmission's drained, might as well replace the filter. And so, yeah. So, hope y'all will join me for my series of getting this old girl back up into her glory. I'm going to eventually give it a lift, do a limited slip diff to it, pretty much making it a good light off-roader since it's only 2-wheel drive. But thank y'all so much, and catch you next time.